Yo, what's up? Welcome to Kind of Funny Games Daily for Monday, May 10th, 2021. One of your hosts, Blessing Adeoye Jr. Joining me is Tim fucking Geddes.
Feeling good about this, Blast. Haven't talked about video games in a while.
Yeah, dude. I feel the same
today.
I
haven't looked at the run of show at all, so I don't even know what's coming today. I'm excited for that.
Oh, we got a pretty good show. I'm not gonna overstate it. All right, okay, it's not one of the best news days, but it's also not a bad news day. It's pretty much in the middle. All right, we're getting middle news. And for me, it's been like a week. It's been a week since I've been on KFGD, and so I'm right there with you. This is like the longest I've gone in a while without being on KFGD, and so I'm fresh.
Well, welcome back.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about video game news, Tim.
Let's talk about it.
PS5 supply being constrained until next year, the coalition going all in on next gen and more, because this is Kind of Funny Games Daily, each and every weekday at 10 a.m. live right here on twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames. We run you through the nerdy news you need to know about. If you're watching live, you can correct us when we get stuff wrong by going to kindoffunny.com/you're wrong. If you don't want to watch live, you can watch later on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, roosterteeth.com, or you can listen later on podcast services around the globe by searching for Kind of Funny Games Daily. To be a part of the show, to patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, where bronze members or above get to write in, and silver members or above get the show ad-free with the exclusive daily post show. Housekeeping for you. It's Monday, which means we got a drop of new content that is now live. Over the weekend, we got an episode of Xcast that went up featuring Sean Capri. That's right, Sean like Connery, Capri like the pants of the Xbox drives. So go check that out. That's his thing. I didn't make that up. That's his thing. We love Sean Capri.
What a great intro.
It is an amazing intro. Go check out that episode. And then episode 2 of the Star Wars, The Bad Batch reactions also went up over the weekend. That's Tim, that's Barrett, that's Roger Pokorny's, giving all them good takes about Star Wars, The Bad Batch.
Go check that out. It's also available as a podcast. If you search for Kind of Funny Reactions on podcast services, it's a new feed. Go check it out. Go support it.
Hell yeah. How are you liking Bad Batch?
Liking it a lot. Yeah, episode 1, highly worth watching for everybody, I think, because it's kind of a mini movie. It's an hour and 10 minutes plus.
Oh, shit.
A really fun, cool Star Wars story. I'm not going to spoil when it takes place because it's a cool, interesting time. Think you're going to like it.
Does it not take place in like the Clone Wars like that? I know that's like another animated Star Wars show. It's post Clone Wars. That. Okay, yeah. But do they connect in any sort of specific way, or is it just the fact that they're Star Wars?
Yes, they connect, but they do a really good job, especially in the first episode, of just understanding that people might have never seen the animated things before and it being totally understandable. It's good stuff.
Gotcha. Then this morning, a new highlight video of Andy and I's Resident Evil 7 playthrough went live. That's edited by the one, the only Roger Pokorny. And let me tell you, we finished Resident Evil 7 during the 12-hour subathon stream. And I know that stream went on actually way beyond 12 hours, didn't it, Kevin?
Yeah. We made it to 3 a.m.
That's what I heard, and you guys are mad people.
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm feeling great. I got so many tweets the next
morning
of people.
Bless got wasted for no reason at all, and almost with no provocation. Bless chugged the glass of whiskey.
No,
there was there was provocation.
I said almost
somebody who I'm pretty sure was Kevin. Was like,
no one can remember.
Bless, you don't seem drunk enough, and so I was like, bet. Drank the whole glass. But also there was reason. All right, we're coming after Greg and Tim's Emily is Away stream, and I wanted to make sure that we were keeping the same energy, and so I drank a glass of whiskey, and then I drank another glass, and then I drank a third glass. All right,
it's the third one that he chugged. It's the third one that he chugged.
It was the third one that I chugged, and it was the third one that had. Listen, if you're gonna play Resident Evil 7, and if you're gonna get to the most confusing maze-like area of Resident Evil 7, I don't recommend chugging a third glass of whiskey because you'll get fucking lost.
Tim,
I didn't know where to go.
2 amazing moments came out of it. One, there was a moment where Bless was lost in a ship and legitimately was like, guys, I need help. I don't know where to go. Like legitimately was like, guys, like I'm scared and I'm lost. Like help me. And 2, he was like, there was just a moment, must have been 20 minutes after he drank the full glass, where he was like, man, it's crazy. I feel like I should be sobering up right now, and it's just not happening. And it's just like, no, that's not how it works.
Well, here's the thing, all right? I was drunk, and so my phrasing was off. What I meant to express was that I was somehow 20 minutes after drinking that glass, I was still sinking more into drunkenness. Like it hadn't like leveled out at all.
That's how
I was
it
getting
works
worse
when you
and
chug
worse.
a glass of whiskey.
Yeah,
Well,
but like
I can't wait to talk to you on Gamescast about your thoughts on Resident Evil 7.
oh yeah, here's the thing. I'll give very clear thoughts on the first 6 to 7 hours. After that, I'm sure it's going to be a bit hazy in terms of what my feelings on Resident Evil 7 are.
Wow.
But I can say
Sounds like your
overall,
experience with that game's going to be better. That's good.
overall enjoyed it though. Overall, Resident Evil 7, I did really enjoy. I think that game has some fantastic moments, and so I'm sure I'll talk about that on one of the upcoming podcasts. Stay tuned for those. But talking about things that went live, of course, that edited version of our Resident Evil 7 playthrough part 2 went up, and then what also went up this morning was the Kind of Funny podcast, an episode titled "What Animals Can We Ride?"
Mm-hmm.
Is that exactly what it sounds like, or is that the
That's
conversation?
what we talk about. Mm-hmm.
All right, go check that out. Live right now on youtube.com/kindoffunny. And then all the games content, of course, is live right now on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. Then Tuesday, that's tomorrow at 11. What's up? What's up, Kevin?
Would it surprise you to know there's a lot of videos of people riding ostriches in that podcast? Because
now I gotta listen. Now I gotta
yeah,
listen.
you do.
You got
you
it.
do.
Do people ride ostrich? I'm not even gonna ask. I'll listen to the podcast. Tomorrow, Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, right here on twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames. We're partnering with Razer to show off the RTX 30 series powered Blade laptops with Andy and the boys playing some Warzone. So get hyped for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you to our Patreon producers, Blackjack and Tom Bach. Today we're brought to you by DoorDash and Burrow, but I'll tell you about that later. For now, let's begin with what is and forever will be the Roper Report. It's time for some news. We have 5 stories today.
Uh-oh.
Did Kevin break the sound barrier?
He got sucked into the fucking void, man. It was like the creepy Thanos guy in Infinity War when he got sucked out and frozen.
Here's something.
There it is.
Okay, there we go.
Tim, you mentioned that you hadn't looked ahead in the Roper Report.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you right now, right? This Roper Report, I'm just going to title, I usually don't do this, but I'm going to title this Roper Report as Next Gen is a slow burn. All right?
For the whole, all the stories. Okay.
It's a slow burn.
We
Not
got
all the stories.
Storytelling.
Really, it's the first couple of stories. It's the first
Got
2
it.
stories.
There's some filler
really.
in between. Okay.
Yeah, there's some filler in between, but Next Gen is a slow burn. Let's start that conversation off with story number 1. PlayStation 5 supply is going to be tight even until next year. This is from Takashi Mochizuki at Bloomberg. Sony warned a group of analysts that the PlayStation 5 will remain in short supply through 2022, suggesting that the company will be constrained in its ability to boost sales targets for its latest games console. While reporting financial results in late April, the Japanese conglomerate said it had sold 7.8 million units of the console through March 31st, and it is aiming to sell at least 14.8 million units in its current fiscal year. That would keep it on pace to match the trajectory of the popular PlayStation 4, which has sold in excess of 115.9 million units to date. In a briefing after those results, Sony told analysts it is challenging to keep up with strong demand. The PS5 has been difficult to find in stock since its release in November, in part because of shortages in components such as semiconductors, and the company hasn't given an official estimate for when it expects supply to normalize. Quote, I don't think demand is calming down this year, and even if we secure a lot more devices and produce many more units of the PlayStation 5 next year, our supply wouldn't be able to catch up with demand, Chief Financial Officer Hiroki Totoki said at the briefing, according to several people who attended and asked not to be named as it wasn't public. Tim, we've talked about the PS5 shortages and next-gen console technology shortages in general due to 1, demand, and 2, semiconductor shortages. For you, what does PS5 shortages, even until 2022, do for you in terms of what the PS5 is going to do, what we can expect from software, what the conversation around is going to be, all that jazz?
There's a lot there, right? And I think that's kind of the key thing of what does this actually mean for software and all that stuff. Like there's one thing that we need to look at here, which is there are 7.8 million PS5s in the wild. So it's not like there's 0 out there. That's a big number, and that is a number of hungry people that can lead to higher attach rates for exclusive titles coming out. And I expect things like Ratchet are going to do extremely well, even though not everybody that has a PS5 wants one, right? Having said that, there is a series of games, an idea of the types of titles that you don't want to put out unless you're going to maximize the base there, right? And I imagine that is at least part of why we haven't heard much about whatever Last of Us Factions turns into be, right? Like the reason we haven't seen a Last of Us 2 PS5 kind of upgrade yet. And maybe I'm totally wrong, and maybe they'll just in the next couple weeks out of nowhere just be like, oh cool, it's patched. But I expect that there is something bigger there, and that they want to actually have a much larger install base for, and that's going to be a very, very long time until they're hitting the numbers where they could be. But that's the thing, we're still on pace with the PS4, and the PS4 was selling really well when it first came out as well. So this isn't all bad news, but of course, just given where we're at right now, it's unfortunate news at the very least, because everything is going to be slower. The what you're talking about, what would you label it? The next gen is a slow burn. It's like we're in that slow burn, and I think that it's going to feel very slow while we're in it. But when we're out on the other end, we're going to be able to look back and be like, okay, well, there are now more millions of PlayStation 5s in the wild than there were PS4s in the wild at the time that came out. On top of that, Sony has its exclusive games on lock at this point, and we're starting to get them all rolling out and whatever. Will that be 2022 or beyond? That's really the question I have, and I think it's going to be beyond, because while 7.8 million is a large number, it is not what they are looking for, and 14.8 even is what they're aiming for by the end of the year. Fantastic number. However, they've had PlayStation games on PS4 sell more, like exclusives sell more than 20 million units. So they want that, obviously.
Yeah, I think the next gen, this next gen, or this new gen, I should say, being a slow burn thing, it feels like a slow burn, and I think it is going to be a slow burn. But when you look at it and compare it to PS4 around this same time, it actually is very impressive, right? Like, not only are the sales of PS5 outpacing the PS4, like slightly outpacing, let's say like comparable at the very least, right? Let's say the software is there to back it up, right? Like, we didn't have a Returnal by this time last gen. We're about to get Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. We didn't have that by this time next gen. Horizon Forbidden West and God of War slated for 2021. Technically, we'll see if they actually come out. But even by, let's say, year 2 of next gen, last gen, we didn't really have this level of software and number of units out there in the wild. And the reason why right now it feels like it's a dire-ish situation in terms of supply is because demand is just off the chain, which is wild to see. But yeah, this slow burn continuing into next year, I think it's going to speak to the fact of something that you touched on in the beginning. There is the fact that I think we might see more cross-gen titles than maybe we expected by this time. Like, I wonder if this does mean that by the time we do get God of War Ragnarok, that probably will be cross-gen, even though it'll probably come out sometime, let's say next year, right? Like, what is going to be the last cross-gen PS5 or PlayStation exclusive game that might come around, let's say later 2022, maybe even 2023, depending on how many units can actually realistically get out there compared to current gen units. So how does that translate to even third-party titles, right? Like, how many more Resident Evil Villages are we going to see that come out on both current gen and come out on last gen and current gen?
Yeah, it's interesting, but I wonder if that's the truth. I wonder if that's really what we're going to see happen, because Ratchet and Clank's about to come out, right? PS5 only. Like, that is a major release. That means that on the PS5 side, from the exclusives, we got Returnal, we got Demon Souls, and now Ratchet and Clank, right? As just pure next-gen PS5 exclusives. And I see that trend kind of continuing. I think that PlayStation knows that they have the value with the PS5 for the millions of people that do have them. And I see the chat bringing up scalpers a lot. I'm sure scalpers take up a chunk of that, but it is not that big of that pie chart. I guarantee it. Like, the scalpers, the point of the scalpers is to then sell it to other people. So people might be paying ridiculously more for this thing, but these, at the end of the day, the majority of these are getting to the hands of gamers at some point. But with that, I think that we're going to see a next gen shift, because PlayStation kind of has to do that to be able to keep the market share of what makes the PS5 special over the Xbox and its competitors, which at this point is exclusive next-gen experiences with things like the haptic feedback and the DualSense and et cetera, which is why we're seeing that so much in the games that we're talking about, right? But what that means for third-party people, I don't really know, but I don't think that in 2022 we're still going to be seeing a lot of PS4, PS5 cross-gen titles. Like I think that
so?
I think this is our final year of seeing those.
And that are you now are you counting like Horizon Forbidden West and even God of War in that conversation?
As this, because those
Okay,
are
as this year.
slated
Gotcha.
for this year. Because I mean, as of now, they're saying it's this year, and if that
Mhm.
changes, then the conversation changes. But
For sure.
I just think that, like, especially in third-party land, like when we're talking about like the Assassin's Creeds and whatever Resident Evil's doing and all that stuff, like I think that we're seeing the end of that all kind of shake out now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious to see how this goes. Like the fact that PS5 continues to be this successful isn't a surprise, but also like it's still nice to see because it's never. I think we've talked about this before, right? Like there was a question a week ago that was talking about like, are these numbers surprising? Is it worth it to put out these numbers or brag about these numbers or feel like there's something to be happy about with these numbers? And yeah, it's nice to see because it's never a given that consoles are going to continue to kill it in this way. And looks like the PS5 continues to kill it. But Tim, that's not the end of the story when it comes to next gen being a slow burn. So let's move over to story number 2, where we can talk about the Gears developer, the Coalition, moving to next gen development in Unreal Engine 5. This comes from a press release on their website. They write this. At the Coalition, we pride ourselves on delivering the best possible Gears of War games and the best possible game performance using cutting-edge tools like Unreal Engine. We wanted to update our fans on both of those things. Thank you to all the fans out there who have been on this journey with us. During a worldwide pandemic and working from home, the team has launched a first strategy title, Gears Tactics, relaunched Gears 5 and Tactics on Xbox Series X/S hardware with performance upgrades and features, revamped Gears 5 multiplayer with a ton of content and updates, and capped the year with the first mainline campaign expansion, Gears 5 Hivebusters, in almost a decade. As we look forward to future games, we're excited to start shifting our resources to next-gen development using Unreal Engine 5. Gears of War has always been at the front of Unreal Engine development as a breakout 720p title for Xbox 360 through last year's 120 FPS multiplayer update for Xbox Series X/S. And we're excited to continue that tradition by developing on Unreal Engine 5 for multiple new projects in the coming years. What does this mean for our current titles? Gears 5 has content on the way, and will continue to release new operations through Operations 7 and 8. Each operation will have 2 drops, including new characters, new maps, and special events. Through the end of the year, we'll have store updates with exciting new content, as well as featured playlists. Shifting to a new engine is a big undertaking, so we want to be clear that we'll not be announcing any new projects or titles for some time. Tim, you're a Gears fan. You like the Coalition. What does this do for you? Are you excited that they're moving full steam ahead into Unreal Engine 5?
This is absolutely huge, man. Like, I don't know how much you remember or cared about the original Gears release on 360, but it was such a visual showpiece title. And so much of that had to do with Unreal Engine and the game's use of it, unique use of it, of really kind of pushing things forward. Like, that was one of the, it's funny we're having this conversation now, just many generations later. Like, that really was a, oh shit, this is what next gen looks like moment. For what the 360 generation was, the HD generation. And so when we saw that first Unreal Engine 5 demo last year as part of the Summer Game Fest, it was crazy, right? Like, it was just like, oh my God, this is what next gen can be. Holy shit, I can't believe it. And then we pretty much quickly, I remember it was me, you, Andy, and Greg, we're all like, okay, but how many games are actually going to put in the effort and work to make the grains of sand look this damn good and to actually make a playable experience out of what this is? The answer is the Coalition. Like, Gears 5 is one of the most visually stunning games I have ever seen. And on top of that, they just keep making it look better because that's how the Xbox ecosystem works now, where old games, even old games being 2 years old games, now look like modern games plus because of all of the abilities that the Series S and X have. But what this means for the next title in the Gears franchise, or whatever it is that Coalition is working on, I'm excited. You know, it's every time, and I know the video games don't work this way, but it's just a fact that when I see that current games are announced in Unreal Engine 4, something in the back of my mind is like, oh man, but there's 5. Like, it would be so cool if this would just be 5. I'm happy that we're starting to see that. And like, this is the type of thing that we're not going to see for a couple years, but eventually it will be the standard. And I'm really stoked that Coalition are right at the forefront of making it that standard.
Yeah, you gotta assume that the next project they're working on is Gears, or one of the projects they're working on is Gears, right? Like in their write up here, they mentioned Gears of War has always been at the front of Unreal Engine development, and that's a thing that I don't think they want to break, right? Like especially for games, a game franchise that they have down, they know how to make Gears. And the last few Gears games, it seems like people have really liked them, and so there's no reason to stop now, right? And if you can use a franchise that you're already familiar with, you've already mastered as the coalition, and you can continue to use in order to get familiar with Unreal Engine 5 before or while you're working on maybe a new title, I think that'll be big for them, right? And they mentioned here multiple new projects in the coming years, which dhruvenator writes in to ask about. dhruvenator wrote into Patreon.com, just like you can, Patreon.com says kind of funny games, and says, "Good morning, Testing and Blim. The coalition," and that's what he says, I didn't mess it up. "The coalition announced today that they are shifting to Unreal Engine 5 and also said, we're excited to continue that tradition by developing on Unreal Engine 5 for multiple new projects in the coming years." Multiple projects. I loved Gears 5, thought it was a refreshing iteration of the Gears universe, and can't wait for Gears 6. With that said, simple question: if the coalition is becoming a two-studio team or a two-team studio, what other game /genre/IP would you like them to work on? Before you say Star Wars, Jeffy Grubb revealed that the coalition isn't working on that IP, I believe. For me, I want Fear back. Thank you all. dhruvenator. Tim, what else could the coalition be working on?
I mean, I would like to see them if it wasn't Gears and if it was something I'm just choosing. The problem with this whole like, what would you want them to be working on thing is we always start with the familiar because we can't just make something up. Like that's their job. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I feel like my answer would be something Marvel or something Star Wars. Like I would love to see the talent that we've seen Gears, like Gears 5, but with a Marvel skin, sounds awesome to me. With a Star Wars skin, sounds awesome to me. And obviously more than a skin with all the loving care that goes into making those games.
Yeah. I think I want to shout out is Microsoft first party, like building this war chest of studios that you often forget that, yeah, you can have a studio that is working on multiple projects. You look at Ninja Theory and they got a bunch of stuff going on there. And for the coalition to be working on multiple projects at once, again, like I think it speaks to the future of Microsoft Xbox looking very bright for first party. But yeah, in terms of what they could be working on, I think that I always want when it comes to publishers, which publishers with a cast of studios like this, or at the very least first party publishers, is to fill in the gaps where they could be. You know, we talk about certain studios specializing in certain things. You look at PlayStation first party, and a lot of people talk about how they've got the third person narrative action game down. We look at Xbox, and right now it seems like Xbox is really trying to corner the market on having strong Western RPGs, right? And I think you can also point out the fact that they have a strong first person shooter catalog too, especially when you lump in the Bethesda studios in there. And so for what I want this coalition project to be, I want to be something that Xbox doesn't necessarily have right now, right? There was that story last week, talking about the leaked court documents and how they reviewed The Last of Us Part 2, and they talked about how they want something along those lines for the Xbox catalog. And it could be cool to see Coalition tackle that, right? Like, what would a more narrative focused action game look like for Coalition? I know Gears 5 probably lumps into that, but what if you could double down on narrative over action and really try to hone in on having a quadruple A experience that gets us invested in the characters, gets us invested in a world? I think that could be a good move for them.
There are so many interesting conversations based on what you're talking about right now. I love this, Bless. So here's the thing. For me, Gears 5 was close to that, right? I think a big problem is it's the fifth in a franchise, spin-offs, remasters, all that stuff not included. But it's the fifth in a franchise. It was a fantastic game. It had a engaging story, fun characters, and backed up by AAA production and amazing gameplay, right? That kind of was their AAA version. If they were to go to that quadruple A, and at this point we're just being silly talking about stuff that doesn't exist, but does exist.
Using buzzwords they use.
We know what we're talking about here, right? Yeah. Like that would be really interesting, and I would love to see that. Having said that, I don't know where Microsoft is at in terms of how it's treating its studios and how the games are being developed with Game Pass in mind. Because Gears 5 is, to date, the biggest like AAA type game that has been released on Game Pass, like as a day and date, like it coming out first party title from Gears. I would say it's their biggest game that they've had, and that was a game that when it was announced, and someone could wrong me if I'm wrong, but when it was announced, that predated Game Pass being announced. So I wouldn't be shocked if Gears 5 coming out as a Game Pass game day and date wasn't the plan originally. So that game was being designed without Game Pass in mind, more just as a standalone $60 title, right? What does a Gears 6 look like? What does the next Gears look like? Because I imagine, and what we've seen so far from Microsoft in the way that it's treating its titles, it might be a little bit more platform based. It might be a little bit more like, here, this is this game that's going to come out on Game Pass, and we want people to keep coming back to it over time, which is the opposite of what you're saying of this AAA Last of Us type thing. I don't think we're ever going to get that from Microsoft. Really? I just don't.
You don't think you don't think Perfect Dark could possibly be that? Because Perfect Dark, I don't think that game is going to come out and be a platform. We're gonna build this game in a way that's gonna have people continuing to come back to it over time. I think that's a game that they're probably gonna be like, okay, this is our polished one and done. You're gonna get a dope narrative. You're gonna get a dope campaign, and that's gonna be it. And you're gonna fall in love with this game for what it is as a single player game.
It could be. I don't expect it to be. And if it is, I don't think it's going to hit that quadruple A level. It'll still be at that AAA level, which again, that's awesome. Like we don't get that many AAA games these days. Like AAA on that level, AAA on the Gears 5 level is what I'm saying. Like more of those, that would be awesome. But there just is the fact that the industry is changing and the Xbox ecosystem itself is changing so much that I don't know what this ends up looking like. But I don't think it's the copying the Last of Us model.
I think you bring up a really good point. You bring up an interesting conversation in terms of how do you keep Game Pass alive and thriving and keep people returning to it. I think for what Xbox first party is, I think you have a diverse portfolio of studios right now that you can have that happening on multiple levels. I think they have a catalog of studios right now where they can have so many different types of games that keep people coming for different purposes, right? So you have you can have something like Everwild or Sea of Thieves be that for you. You can have Halo be that for you, where those are the platform games. Those are the games that are gonna keep people coming back because they're live games, right? Like they're coming back for the updates. They're coming back to play with their friends. They're coming back in the way that I go back and I play Apex all the time, right? Like you can have Everwild. You can have, and this is me assuming that Everwild is going to be similar to Sea of Thieves. You can have Sea of Thieves. You can have Halo be that. You can have Gears multiplayer be that for that platform. But I do think you do have to have games that are the tentpole. Hey, this is going to make me download Game Pass in a way that maybe Halo might not be that for certain people. You know, I think diversity or versatility in your catalog might be the name of the game there. And so I don't know. I could see it being a let's get every single type of game that we can on Game Pass to get people interested in the platform and ping-ponging back and forth between these different types of games. And in terms of, to bring it back to the conversation of what is the non-Gears 5 game that Coalition could be working on, I think of it in a way where what is something that's going to complement Coalition in the way that you look at Naughty Dog and they have Last of Us and Uncharted, and those games have completely different energies, but they both complement each other or complement Naughty Dog's strengths, right? Narrative, third-person action game, like Naughty Dog has that down. You look at Rockstar, and they have GTA, Red Dead Redemption. Again, very different settings, different energies, but those games still complement the tool set that Rockstar has down. I could see the Coalition's other game being something that is similar, right? Third-person action game, mechanically similar to Gears because that's what they excel at. But what setting can we put it in that is completely different? How can we either make like the thing that they talked about in that document last week, right? How can we make something that stands up to that type of game, that Last of Us-ish sort of style of game? Or how can we make something that feels like it's brand new, feels like it's fresh for us, but also feels like it's fresh for the Microsoft catalog? What if we did make our own Mission Impossible style game, or Uncharted, or something that feels either modern or down to earth, no pun intended, like something that takes place on Earth, maybe. I don't know. Like, I think there's something there in terms of switching up what the Coalition does for their new game.
Absolutely. I'm really interested in looking at the last couple years of this level of title we're talking about, this AAA, quadruple A, like crazy tier. And the idea that we've seen things like Uncharted Lost Legacy, right? We've seen things now like Spider-Man Miles Morales. How common is that going to be going forward? And is that going to be more of the Microsoft model for this, where maybe we don't ever get the 130-hour Last of Us 2 style epic, but they are doing smaller versions of it that are going on Game Pass, not quite episodic, like more than that, like more meat on the bone than just like
something that
come
you can
back every 2 months for 2 hours.
Something that you
like,
can release on a more regular basis. Because the Last of Us, between The Last of Us and Last of Us Part 2, that was 7 years. I expect maybe another 7 years before we get The Last of Us Part 3, right? And that is a game that you expect to be this polished AAA, probably at this point 20 to 30 hour type experience, where not every game needs to be that, right? Like, what if you do have the Coalition work on something that is 9 to 10 hours, but does have that same level of AAA polish that you want out of the Coalition?
I mean, that's the thing is, there's a big conversation right now about Resident Evil Village, right? And some people have the opinion that it's like, oh, the game's not worth $60 because it's only 10 hours or whatever it is. The 10 hours, though, are produced on a level that is just so much higher than so many other things. And that's where the value comes from, is the production value of it all, right? And it's just like taking that and applying it to these other games is really interesting. Like, think about Last of Us Part 2. The game has 2 different halves, right? Imagine if they had put that out as 2 different games, even in the same year. Like, what if Last of Us 2 Part 1 came out in January of a year, and then Last of Us 2 Part 2 came out in June? You can call it something different. Like I know that sounds silly, but like, imagine they didn't market it that way. They marketed it as, whatever this thing.
Yeah. Or like, what if, I mean, even if it was 1 year in the next year, right? Like an Infinity War Endgame type experience. Like, you look at Resident Evil is a great comparison, because we've gotten, Tim, how many Resident Evil games have we gotten in the last 3 to 4 years?
Essentially annualized, right?
Yeah. And that is a AAA, like, they're releasing that at full price. And, like, me playing through Resident Evil Village, I got to the end of it and I was like, damn, that felt short. But also, like, I wouldn't say that wasn't worth full price, right? Like, the closest I got to that was probably Resident Evil 3 remake, where I finished that in like a sitting and a half, and I was like, okay, well, shit, that was really short. But even still, like, those games have a level of polish to them and a level of, all right, I know what I'm getting with this. This feels like a full game, and if this is how they want to do Resident Evil to make it annualized, go for it, right? It's a strategy that seems to work for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because you're right. Like, Resident Evil 3 was very, very short for the price of that content. And that did come also with those multiplayer suites that nobody really gives a shit about and all that stuff. Sure. But with Game Pass, though, there's this interesting opportunity that we haven't seen explored yet, but I imagine we're going to, where we don't see games as having different modes. We kind of just see the different modes as being downloadable on Game Pass as their own separate games. But how does, like, the multiplayer is one thing versus single player is another thing, right? Like, that could just be, you can see them as different video games. On the PlayStation side, though, they don't have Game Pass. So they do lean on this is a $70 experience. It is going to be longer. It is going to have all this stuff. What's that mean for God of War Ragnarok, though? Because I still wouldn't be surprised if God of War Ragnarok ends up being a Miles Morales Uncharted Lost Legacy style game that is smaller, that does bridge the gap. And at that point, maybe, I don't know if that backs the argument of it being cross-gen or PS5 exclusive. It could be one or the other. But that also could mean that it's more likely for 2021 than we expect. Still not fully likely, but there's a lot of things up in the air that I'm really interested in. I imagine that that's going to be a realm of video game that's going to be explored a lot more in the coming years because of the pressures of how much quadruple A production costs, both resource-wise and financially, and the fact that Game Pass is the entire strategy of Xbox.
Tim, I really like this conversation, and I'm going to do something that I don't usually do. I'm going to take an ad break in the middle of this conversation. When we come back, I'm going to pull in a question from Benjamin Barry that I was going to save for later in the show, but fits the conversation that we're having. And so remember, you can go to patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, where you can get the show ad-free. And speaking of ads, let us tell you about our sponsors.
This podcast is brought to you by DoorDash. Do you really want to go out and get food? All right, Kevin, do you want to go out and get food right now, or you want somebody to bring you food?
Bring me food.
Ladies and gentlemen, you ain't no hunter or gatherer. Let somebody else do all the work. Use DoorDash. Did you forget that one thing at the store? Now you can get snacks, drinks, and household essentials in 30 minutes with DoorDash. Dinner? Check. Deodorant? Check. Morning pick-me-up from Dunkin'? Check. Get everything you need whenever you need it with DoorDash. You want Chinese, they want pizza, and someone is craving froyo? There is something for everyone on DoorDash. How do I know so much about DoorDash? Because I'm Greg Miller, and I use DoorDash all the time. I got the Dash Pass, so I don't pay for delivery. Sometimes Jen and I go on there, we're like, what do we want for dinner? We don't know what we want for dinner. We don't know what we want for dinner. So we look at what's being recommended, we pick from there. And it's great, and it's different, and it comes to us, and it's hot, and you get to track them as they come, and they tell you where it is in the process. DoorDash is great. Now, you can get the grocery store essentials you need with DoorDash too. Get drinks, snacks, and other household items delivered in under an hour. Ordering is easy. Open the DoorDash app, choose what you want from where you want it, and your items will be left safely outside your door with their contactless delivery drop-off setting. With over 300,000 partners in the US, Puerto Rico, Australia, and now Canada, you can support your neighborhood go-tos or choose from your favorite national chain restaurants like Popeyes, Chipotle, and Cheesecake Factory. A long time ago, I thought it was Chipotle, but it's Chipotle. Did you know that, Kevin? For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code GAMES2021. For our Canadian listeners, use the code GAMESCA. That's 25% off up to a $10 value and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code GAMES2021 in the US and Games CA in Canada. Don't forget, Games 2021 in the US, Games CA in Canada for 25% off your first order with DoorDash, subject to change. Terms apply. Our next sponsor, ladies and gentlemen, is Burrow. If you haven't heard us talk about Burrow furniture lately, you haven't listened to Tim Geddes talk about his couch. What does he talk about all the time? It's got a USB charger built in. He loves that, but Burrow's even better than that. Most of us haven't found our forever home, which makes buying furniture a double-edged sword. You're either buying some cheap futon that you'll just leave out on the curb someday, or you're investing in an inexpensive sofa that might last forever, but definitely becomes a pain in the butt when it's time to move. You think someone would have figured out how to create quality furniture built for the way we actually live wherever we live? Well, someone has. It's Burrow. Burrow is easy to shop for. Shop for everything you need for your living room online. No far-flung warehouses, no high-pressure salespeople. Plus, Burrow's world-class support team is available for you whenever you need them. It's easy to assemble and it's easy to move. Burrow's innovative modular design and super helpful instructions make assembling and disassembling your furniture quick and hassle-free. And when it's time to move, your Burrow furniture won't hold you back. Kevin, you've known Tim a long time and you always call him a big old dum-dum. He had no problem installing this furniture. That means it's pretty simple, right?
Yep.
Designed for the way you live, their credenzas are actually tall enough to fit next-gen consoles standing vertically. Their award-winning Nomad sofa has Tim's built-in USB charger for all-day power. Plus, you get fast and free shipping on every order. It saves you an average of $100 on large items like a couch and a logistics headache. Right now, you can get $75 off your first order at burrow.com/games. That's Burrow, BURROW.com/games for $75 off your Burrow purchase. Burrow.com/games.
That was cool.
We're fancy now, huh?
That was really cool. Oh, man, I can get used to that. Tim, like I said, after the break, so that's where we're at right now, right? I'm bringing in this question from Benjamin Barry, who wrote into patreon.com/kindoffunnygames, just like you can. And people at patreon.com/kindoffunnygames don't even know what just happened. They're like, oh, wait, what was that? What was fancy?
We had fancy edited ads. Roger Pokorny, killing the game.
Shout out to Roger Pokorny. This is from Benjamin Barry. He writes in and says, hey, Blessing and Tim. The PS5 and PS4 top selling games for April info is out. And in the US for PS5, the number one game is MLB The Show. And number two is Outriders. For PS4 in the US, number one is MLB The Show. And number four is Outriders. These two got both the Game Pass money from Microsoft, and they hit the very top of the charts on PlayStation. This has to be a dream scenario for them. Is this a path to success that you think more third-party games might follow? Get the Game Pass day one money and PR bump from being on Game Pass and its 23 million plus subscribers, but then also sell full price on PlayStation to take advantage of the much larger install base.
Absolutely. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of where we're at as an industry right now, where things are changing and the way games are financed is rapidly evolving and changing, but the old way still exists. And I think that it's the different developers and publishers that are going to really kind of look at their games and their catalog and find out what is the best distribution strategy for each one. They're the ones that are going to benefit the most because getting that double dip of the being on Game Pass money, that's a guarantee, plus still getting the full price side from the PlayStation. I mean, come on, that's best of both worlds.
Yeah, I know we talk about we talk about Game Pass all the time across all our podcasts, even PS I Love You. Like we talk about Game Pass all the time. I know people get sick of it, but the fact of the matter is that it's changing the way things function, right? It's changing it's changing the industry. It's changing the way that we can even think about release structures for games, because this makes a very good point that like if you can get the Game Pass money and you can also get the traditional release money, off of different platforms, then you are living the best of both worlds. And to the conversation of how do you bolster Game Pass? How does Microsoft support Game Pass? What does that look like from the first party slate? Like it is going to be a combination of that slate of first party games that are promised to come out day and date on Game Pass, combining with a slate of third party games that might make surprise releases on Game Pass, like MLB The Show and Outriders. And I'm sure that is going to be far from the end of it when you look at it and realize that, oh, this is a very successful way to release games. How much more support is MLB The Show getting on Xbox releasing on Game Pass than not?
I mean, dude, here's the thing. Resident Evil Village had PlayStation advertising support and marketing on lock, right? What if it didn't? Would Village be on Game Pass?
Probably.
Think about
maybe.
that, right? Like, because there is this like category of third-party titles that there's like a tier list, right? Like when we talk about like the first parties, obviously they're the big dogs. Then when we have third parties, there are groups like Ubisoft that are kind of big enough to be their own thing, where they have a shit ton of teams, right? There's the Capcoms, there's the Square Enixes, and then it starts trickling down to there's like other guys that, different teams within that. But if if Game Pass starts latching on to games even bigger than Outriders, bigger than MLB The Show, because MLB is huge, but that's more through MLB than it is through like Sony San Diego, right? Imagining them latching on to things like Resident Evil or a Final Fantasy title or whatever it is, it's going to be hard to wrestle those marketing rights away from Sony. But if they did, damn. Tim.
Speaking of damn, story number 3, Ubisoft will now brand all of its own games as Ubisoft Originals. This is from Tom Phillips at Eurogamer, and I believe this conversation started last week when they announced their new Division game and called it Ubisoft Original.
I knew
now
it.
we got confirmation.
Called that shit. This is awesome.
Yeah, man. The story goes like this. Assassin's Creed and Far Cry publisher Ubisoft will now brand all of its games made by internal studios as Ubisoft Originals. The name first cropped up last week when Ubisoft announced Tom Clancy's The Division Heartland, a new free-to-play spin-off due later this year or early next. When asked whether this label meant anything more than fancy new branding, a Ubisoft spokesperson told Eurogamer today that, quote, moving forward, the Ubisoft Original mention is attached to all of Ubisoft's games created in-house by our talented developers, end quote. Perhaps this is just fancy branding, but currently Ubisoft does not publish any major games from external studios. If Ubisoft was looking to release games from other developers in the future, perhaps some kind of indie publishing program, this label would make sense as a way to differentiate those games from games made by the dozens of internal Ubisoft studios around the world. And Tim, you mentioned you did call this. I was listening to the episode, and as you're saying, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And here we go. It's happening.
Yeah. Hey, honestly, I'm pretty surprised that it's actually happening, but this is cool. I'm excited by this. Like, it doesn't actually affect much, but it just kind of feels like these things mean more than, for, like I said, last week, Ubisoft for years has been something that we talk about as if they are us studios, and there have been Ubisoft Originals. We say a Ubisoft game. We know what that means. There's expectations.
Yep.
Now, cool. It's a Ubisoft Original. Like, they are getting to own that branding and kind of not run from it. Instead, embrace it and be like, yeah, this is what we do. I'm just very interested in what this ends up looking like from a presentation standpoint, because, the PlayStation Studios thing, having that logo before the games, just like Marvel Studios, just like all this stuff that's like, this is just where the world's at now. There's expectations set, and that means that there's like a seal of approval almost on it of what this means to the games ecosystem, and I think it's rad.
Yeah. Like for me, I'd like to think that I'm not a sucker for marketing, right? That I'm able to differentiate like marketing, capitalism, and corporations and all the bullshit that goes into that. I will say I am a fan of good branding. I love good branding. I love shit being handled the right way in order to deliver it to an audience so that it'll be palpable or that we understand and get what it is. And I think them calling their games Ubisoft Originals and maybe factoring that into branding, right? Like seeing that pop up at the beginning of a Ubisoft game and us understanding and knowing what that is. I think that's a really cool thing. It's a really smart thing. It creates a family of games in a way that somebody playing Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege and Assassin's Creed, like I think the average or regular consumer might play those games and not really put it together that these are from the same umbrella, from the same publisher. But when you start to add that Ubisoft Originals thing or put a stronger stamp on it, I think that starts to create this family of games that works together in a way that PlayStation Studios has started to. Or you look at something, and I know Marvel's the easy comparison because Marvel's kind of like the godfathers of the shit at this point. But you look at the MCU and you look at the Marvel movies, and you're like, that is a family of movies that all work together. We don't expect Ubisoft Originals to necessarily have a shared universe or anything along those lines, but from a marketing branding perspective, there is something there in terms of creating something for your fan base to get behind when it comes to releasing all these games and having something to connect them together in that way, which I think is really smart. And one thing I also want to shout out with this is the article mentions, right, that like that Ubisoft hasn't published games from external developers. They don't do like they don't do what PlayStation Studios does, which is, hey, we're going to partner with Housemarque in order to make Returnal for our platforms and call that a PlayStation original, or say that's from PlayStation Productions. Maybe this opens up the door for that, right? If Ubisoft did have an IP, let's say Splinter Cell, for example, if Ubisoft's like, hey, we want to make a new Splinter Cell, but we just don't have the bandwidth within our studios to do it. What if we partnered with an external studio to do that? You can still call it a Ubisoft original thing, right? Meanwhile, it's being developed by an external publisher. You can have those situations pan out too under this umbrella. And so I think this is a pretty cool thing. I'm into it.
It's really cool. And, I think that even looking at Microsoft's side, right? Microsoft Game Studios has been slowly building in the background, and we haven't really seen the fruits of that yet. But hopefully in a year or two, it will be similar to PlayStation Studios and MCU and all the stuff that we're talking about now, where there's going to be a couple major tentpoles that we have understandings of what a PlayStation Studios game is, what a Ubisoft Originals game is, what a Microsoft Game Studios game is. And that means more than just, oh, it's just a video game on this console. It's like there is some type of cohesive tissue between all of them. I think that's pretty damn rad.
Tim, we talked about Capcom earlier in this episode. Let's talk about Capcom some more with story number 4. Capcom continues to keep killing it in sales. This is James Batchelor at GamesIndustry.biz. Capcom has released its full year financial results and reports it reached a new high in terms of profit for the 4th year in a row. For the 12 months ended March 31st, 2021, the Resident Evil publisher saw net sales of $859.6 million, a year-on-year increase of 16.8%. Meanwhile, operating income came in at $318.1 million, up 51.6%, and marking an 8th consecutive year of growth, while ordinary income was up 51.8% to $319.9 million. This was despite the impact of the pandemic, or the impact that the pandemic had on other segments, such as arcade operations and other businesses, which handles everything from esports to ventures like the Monster Hunter movie. Despite launching less than a week before the end of the financial year, Monster Hunter Rise was the biggest seller, with 4 million units shipped worldwide. 10 days after launch, Capcom announced this had risen to 5 million. The remake of Resident Evil 3, released at the very beginning of the financial year, also sold well, with 3.9 million units shipped. Capcom also highlighted ongoing sales of titles from previous years, including Monster Hunter World, Iceborne, and the Resident Evil 2 remake. The publisher is banking on long-tail sales to continue driving growth, with plans to further market all these previous releases in the year ahead, alongside new releases such as the recently released Resident Evil Village. They keep on killing it, Tim.
Yeah, man. Again, this is one of those things when you're in this industry long enough, like you start to see like things just change. Like the ways the water is moving, going a different way. All of a sudden, Capcom for years, horrible,
Yep.
putting out trash titles, not putting out the games people wanted. And it was just like, oh, Capcom's dead. And then all of a sudden, the last couple years, they've just turned it around, man. And between Monster Hunter and Resident Evil, they have a really, really, really good head on their shoulders where it's like we expect quality from them. It's not like we like hope things are good. We expect them to be good. It's a great place to be. And I think that when we look at their library, obviously there's so many games that they can bring back from the past that they haven't yet. We don't have a Dino Crisis yet. I imagine we're going to get that one day. We're going to, and that's going to be very freaking exciting. Hopefully we get an Onimusha. I think that's a little less likely, but I'd be very excited about it. But they're going to continue to do this path like they have with Resident Evil. They've created this amazing thing with the RE engine where games are just fucking beautiful using it. Whether it's Devil May Cry 5 or Resident Evil remake behind the shoulder type stuff or Resident Evil 7 and Village first person shooter, the engine just works and it's awesome. And I played Village on my PS5, and it was fucking breathtaking. I played Resident Evil 2 and 3 on my PS4, and it was breathtaking. They got something here, right? And that engine even goes all the way to Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch. It works across places. This is good. It's allowing these people to just make dope-ass games. And I hope that they continue to make those games. And with these types of dollars, I imagine they're going to.
Mm-hmm. Tim, I want you to put on your speculative cap. All right, we just got Resident Evil Village, which is their first big release of this next fiscal year. What else do you think Capcom might have slated? Because right now they don't have much that's announced. Like we know RE-verse is coming, and then we got Monster Hunter Stories 2, the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, and I believe that's about the Resident Evil 4 Oculus game that they announced. You know, we got that upcoming, but it doesn't seem like we have much that is huge on the horizon from Capcom. Unless I'm missing anything. Kindafunny.com/you're wrong.
No, I think that's just kind of where we're at right now with this next gen kind of crossover, right? Like when you look at Capcom and their Resident Evil games, we don't talk about it enough. Like when we talk about the not the Beyonce drop, but kind of the video game version of Fallout 4 was announced at E3 and came out in November, right? Resident Evil is on a completely different level with that, where for the last couple years, they've just announced a game and then that game's come out very fucking soon. I'll never forget that Resident Evil 2 was it was announced a long time ago, but in a we make this way, not in a it's fucking real. It's fucking real announced at that E3 at Sony's conference. I played that game that day at E3. Or the next day. That's crazy. Like it seemed like they're announcing it, but it's going to come out one. No, it's ready. It's playable.
That felt like a Kingdom Hearts 3 announcement, but that game actually came out the next year.
Totally, and it came out when you say next year. You're talking about 6 months.
Yep.
Because it was from June to January. Like, that is crazy. And then RE3 was an even tighter turnaround in terms of announcement and release. Granted, Imran on our shows has kind of hinted before that those projects were originally tied together, going to be more of like 2 and 3 type situation. So that makes a little more sense. But it's just exciting to think that like they announced Resident Evil 7 in a very similar way. Like it's announced at E3 and it comes out that next January. Village is now the Resident Evil game that we've known about from announcement to release that took the longest, and that pushes us into May. That's what I think we're in the most interesting place is the last couple major RE games were announced at either E3 or at PlayStation's State of Play, like an end of the year Game Awards time period type thing. So I think that because Village is so late in the year compared to the January releases they've had the last couple times, I imagine that it's going to be a little longer until we hear about Resident Evil 4 remake.
Really? Okay, that was going to be my next question is, do you think Resident Evil 4 remake could come out? Let's say not this fiscal year, because this fiscal year will go up to March 2022, and I don't know if that's going to be in the slate, but do you think it'll be a 2022 game?
My gut kind of says that. You know, I think that, again, the next gen issues going on right now of the supply, I think might change that because I imagine that it's going to be a next gen title. I don't think it'll be cross gen. I am interested in the RE4 remake in the proximity of Village based on just the look of it. Like, I am a little surprised that they went the route they did with Village, knowing that 4 has such a similar aesthetic. Unless it was making assets to double.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it could be a thing of hey, let's start to conceptualize what an RE4 remake would look like and have these things work similarly. And that might even work. That might even work to their benefit on a marketing and advertising perspective, right? Like, hey, let's release Resident Evil Village, get people hyped about Resident Evil 4 because this game kind of harkens back to Resident Evil 4. And then once people are hyped, cool, let's release Resident Evil 4 remake to get people or to capitalize off of that hype. Even though theoretically, I would think that you would do it the opposite way around and do RE4 remake before Village, so you can build hype for Village. But maybe that is still the strategy.
Here's the thing, though, Bless. Like a lot of the things that we talked about, like the slow burn of next gen in this episode, going back to what I was talking about imagine Last of Us 2 if they had released it in two different parts. This is a different situation, but Capcom kind of has been doing what I'm talking about the last couple of years, which is putting out these smaller experiences like Resident Evil 2 and 3 specifically, right? And I would argue that, like, sure that Resident Evil Village is shorter than other games. I think its 10 hours are of a much higher quality than anything comparable around it. So it's like at that point, a 30-hour game isn't a better game than it just because it's longer. That's just not how games work. But I think that them kind of building up this thing, granted, last year when we played RE3, all of us were kind of like, oh man, this is really short and seems like a weird thing with 2 being so close to it. But if we just get used to that and expect that, I don't think we're going to be let down. Because RE3, fantastic video game. It just didn't last that long. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like looking at, imagining if they continue to just do this where we expect RE to continuously put out different things, whether they're remakes or new titles, and we grow to have this expectation that it's going to be sub 10 hours. But that's what it is. I think that's an interesting thing that we're going to see a lot more of.
Yeah. And with the Capcom conversation, it's worth shouting out, like, Street Fighter, of course. I'm sure they have Street Fighter 6 on the horizon somewhere. Whether that's this fiscal year, I don't see it, but we'll see. There's also Pragmata, which I believe was slated for 2023. I forget if that was a leak thing or an official thing, but that's not coming out in this fiscal year. And then they have games here or there that could fit in, but very curious to see if they have anything. Again, like, quarantine affects things, affects development, it affects plans. And so maybe they won't have anything big for the next fiscal year after RE Village, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Tim, we got one more news story for the Roper Report. Story number 5. Would it surprise you to know that we got more court leaks from that Epic versus Apple case?
Not at all.
Tim, Epic Games offered $200 million to Sony for up to 6 PC PlayStation ports. This is Andy Robinson at Video Games Chronicle. Epic Games offered a $200 million minimum guarantee to Sony for 4 to 6 PC PlayStation ports. That's according to a confidential PDF document included in the ongoing Epic Apple trial, which was reportedly briefly uploaded to the case's public server. According to the document, Epic Games was at one point targeting all 3 console platform holders for potential content deals for its PC game store. The document states that Nintendo talks were essentially a non-starter, while opening discussions with Microsoft were complicated by the fact that it was essentially a competitor for content deals, and that its PC Game Pass leader was against Epic's strategy. On PlayStation, the doc states that Epic was awaiting feedback on its $200 million minimum guarantee offer for 4 to 6 games, which would see Epic take the hit should those titles generate less revenue than that figure. Since Sony's first PC port, Horizon Zero Dawn, debuted on Steam, and its next Days Gone, is also coming to Valve's platform, it's possible that the company did not take up Epic's offer. And I would say that's probably confirmed that they didn't take up Epic's offer. But yeah, this is another one that I think is just fascinating to look at and read through. All these court leakings have been very fascinating to look through because it's all been good insight to how the industry works, and also a lot of good confirmation in the way that the industry works, especially exactly how we expected it to work in terms of how these deals and exclusivity and all that stuff plays out.
Yeah, it's really interesting bringing Nintendo into this, where it's like they're essentially a non-starter, and it's like, of course, Nintendo. They're their own thing, marching to the beat of their own drum. They're not doing this stuff. I wonder if that's ever gonna change.
That Mario releases on PC.
That's my thing, man. Like, it would have been crazy a couple of years ago to imagine that PlayStation titles would be on PC, and I know that is a easier chasm to jump over than Nintendo. But I just wonder if there are going to be enough changes in the industry, enough things shaken up where just the way games are thought about, consumed, paid for changes so much that Nintendo needs to adapt in a different way.
Never.
I don't think they're going to. I'm just saying it's like, it could be interesting.
Hell would freeze. It would be interesting. Hell would freeze over. When you look at the attachment rate for the Switch and the first party Nintendo games, and the Nintendo games being what drives those sales of Switches, I think it would have Nintendo would have to release 2 Wii U's in a row after the Switch for that to happen. You know, like I think they would have to be in a dire situation for them to go, fuck it, let's go third party or let's release our games elsewhere, because they've had so much success. I think a possible thing would maybe be legacy titles on PC to some extent. Like maybe they release,
I'm telling you, man,
like
there's a
like
whole
SNES or SNES games or N64 games, and like they go back to the furthest depths of their catalog to release them in that way for preservation or something. But even that sounds like a big step for Nintendo.
It's a huge step, but I think that it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. We need to remember that we all thought it would be impossible for Nintendo to ever re-release their old games, their ROMs, for anything less than the $5 to $20 that they have been on the eShop forever since the Wii. And on the Nintendo Switch Online, you get all of those NES games, all those SNES games for just your subscription cost.
Mm-hmm.
Never would have thought Nintendo would do that, but they did. So keep an eye on Nintendo.
That makes more sense. But yeah, you know, like your point stands that you never know how things will shift and change. And so I definitely feel you there. But I think hell would freeze over, Tim. But Tim, hell freezing over is just so far away. Hopefully, if I was coming out to mom and pop shops today, where would I look?
The official list of upcoming software across each and every platform, as listed by the Kind of Funny Games Daily show host, each and every weekday.
Yeah. Out today, we got Hood, Outlaws, and Legends for PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X/S, Xbox One, and PC. I played a little bit of that over the weekend. I didn't enjoy it that much, but maybe you might. So go check that out if you're interested in Hood, Outlaws, and Legends. Tim, are you familiar with what that game is?
No, but I saw a video of it. It looks dope as shit.
It looks cool. It's a PvPvE game, and so you're basically like performing a heist against another team that's also performing a heist. You're trying to get the treasure and take it away. And so you're facing other players, but then you're facing NPCs at the same time. Cool idea that I think it does a little bit too much. There's a little bit too much going on for a PvP game. There's too many steps involved. You got to like locate the key. You got to steal the key. You got to unlock the where the treasure is. You got to find the treasure. You got to take it to your thing. You got to winch it. You got to steal it. So it's a lot going on that wasn't working for me, but I might go back to it to try it out again because it might have just been like a bad play session. But we'll see for that one. I know Mike's also playing it, so I'm sure he'll talk about it soon. And then we also got Battle Beast coming out, or it's out today for PC. A few new dates for you. Real Politics 2 is coming out of early access this Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. There's a Hitman 3 featured contract for Spawn on Me that's coming out May 20th. Shout out to that. And then Scarlet Hollow Episode 2 is coming out to Steam June 11th. Of course, Tim, Kind of Funny Games Daily. It's live. That means we might make mistakes about things we might say. That's why you, while watching live, can go over to kindoffunny.com/you're wrong. Write in, let us know what we got wrong as we got it wrong so we can correct it for those watching later on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames and on podcast services around the globe. And let's see here. We got a few from Nanobiologist. But Nanobiologist writes in with one, and then he writes in again to say, actually, I was wrong. You're wrongs himself. And so I'm going to leave that one alone. He also says this: Tim said a majority of PS5s made their way to the hands of gamers, but an estimated 7% of PS5s sold were bought by scalpers. That's 546,000 units. But I think Tim's point still stands, though, that even though scalpers get them, scalpers still sell them on to consumers.
And on top of that, like I said, the majority, 7%. Last time I checked, definitely a minority. But even then, yeah, like they're in the hands of scalpers to then get in the hands of gamers at ridiculous prices. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm just saying that there are, no matter what way you shake it, over 6, maybe 7 million PS5 units in gamers' hands.
Yeah, that makes that. I think you made sense when you made the point. Like I was right there with you, Tim. This week's hosts for Kind of Funny Games Daily go like this. Tomorrow is Greg and Gary Whitta. Wednesday is Greg and Janet Garcia. Thursday is Greg and Tim motherfucking Geddes. And then Friday, it's me and Tim. That's right. We're back at it like a bad habit. If you're watching this live on Twitch right now, after this is Mike and Nick playing what, Kevin?
Uncharted.
They're
But before
continuing their
that,
playthrough.
we're going to be doing a live reaction to the Venom Let There Be Carnage trailer. So check
Whoa.
that out.
Let's check that out. Of course, this has been Kind of Funny Games Daily. You can weekday live right here on twitch.tv/Kind of Funny Games. We run you through the nerdy news you need to know about. We have a Patreon post show for those that are subbed at the silver level of patreon.com/Kind of Funny Games. So stick around for that. Otherwise, until next time, let there be carnage.